Can you double check with Annika that
Yeah.
he did get the link? All right. Hi, everyone. It's Dr. V here. Welcome to this episode of the Inner Circle podcast. We're super excited to have you here with us today. And those of you who are joining us from any of the social media channels, drop in and say hello. And you can also, it shouldn't be too late to register. If you want to actually be in on this call where you can chat with us here in Zoom, you can go to mhhinnercircle.com. And it shouldn't be too late to register so that you can get directly into the Zoom if you want to. So let's jump in and get the webinar started here. And hi, everyone. Come on in. I'm going to do a little bit of quick maintenance here. And then we will get started. Welcome to this episode of Inner Circle. Let me see here really quick. And we'll do this again. Perfect. Perfect, perfect. Yay, I think we've got it. We're on, everyone. And we're so excited to have you here with us for today's episode of our Inner Circle live podcast show. And we have a very special guest with us tonight. I'm super excited to introduce you. We're going to be talking about such a relevant topic, and that is all about EMFs tonight. And I want to introduce a friend and a colleague, Nick Pineault. How are you today, Nick?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Did I say your last name right?
It's Pinot, like the wine.
Oh, Pinot. Thank you for, I was thinking that I was probably butchering that, so I'm glad I asked.
No
And
problem.
agree with that. I'm so glad to have you on with us. We've got people who are still coming in. So we do our podcast just a little differently. For 99% of them, we do them live, and we invite people to come on in and hang out with us while we're doing these live episodes of these podcasts. And then we take the recording and we pop it up on our podcast channels. And so it just makes for something fun to do in the evenings outside of watching all the garbage that's on TV. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
So, Tara, yeah, if you could just get everyone in, come on in, everyone, and say hello. There's a chat box down at the bottom of Zoom, of your Zoom screen. If you've logged in, if you registered and you're in on Zoom with us for today's episode, jump in and say hello. We're so excited to have you here with us. And so I want to introduce to you Nicholas Pineault, and he is also known as the EMF guy. Put a one in the box if you know about Nick or if you've heard of him. Put a one in the box. I like to keep it interactive because I really like to hear what you have to say and hear what your thoughts are. And so I want to introduce Nick for just a little bit really quick before we get started, just in case you're not familiar with Nick. He is known as the EMF guy, and Nick is the #1 best-selling author of the Non-Tinfoil Guide to EMFs. He is an advocate for safe technologies, and through his unconventional approach, blending humor, science, and common sense, Nick has become a leading voice on the topic of electromagnetic pollution and how it affects our health. And for the last few years, Nick has actually been interviewing some of the best minds on health and technology, and he's been facilitating the creation of courses and educational materials to raise awareness on this very important issue. And Nick, I'm so glad that you're here with us today because, I was just having a conversation with my husband last night about the meter readers that are right outside of our homes. And back in, I think it was back in like 2016, 2017, I had two engineers in Austin come to see me, a husband and wife. They had built this beautiful smart home, and it had been featured in like Home and Gardens magazine and the Architectural magazine because it was an absolutely stunning house.
Hmm.
And they started getting sick. One of them started getting, and I can't remember which one got which symptoms, but one of them started getting tumors. Another one started getting, I don't remember what kind of issues. And they ended up figuring out, these are two intelligent people, right? You know, they're engineers. They ended up figuring out that it was the EMF, the from the meter readers and the other electromagnetic things that were bouncing around in the house that was causing it. And so they started gathering a lot of data, and they collected enough data to be able to show the city of Austin, Texas, how dangerous that the meter readers are. And they were able to get the city of Austin to change their ruling on the electric meter readers. And so now for like an extra, it used to be like 10 or $20 a month. I don't know if it's still the same. For an extra 10 or $20 a month, you can have the electric automatic meter reader turned off and
Hmm.
have, one of the people from the city come and do a manual reading. Now, I think this is super pertinent because we can talk about EMFs, the danger of EMFs every day, but I feel like it doesn't hit home for everybody. And that's why I wanted to start this discussion with you, with this story of these two engineers who were able to amass enough evidence to get the city of Austin to change their mind and allow people at request to be able to do that. And so let's kind of turn this over to you because there's a lot of questions that I want to ask you, and I thought maybe we could start with asking, just a basic question for those who are here with us right now who might be wondering exactly what EMFs are and how their exposure or how our exposure, as a country has increased over the last 100 years.
Sure. Well, EMFs are, really the EMFs we're going to be talking about are the human-made EMFs, not the natural kind. And these are
Okay.
completely different types of exposure, right? We have the sun exposure to the sun we know is very healthy in the right dose, and even more so now that we have all the research on vitamin D. And I think that research exploded since the pandemic. When that's a good thing, we realized that it turns out our ancestors used to live in the sun, and we need to do the same in order to be healthy, or else we maybe run into health issues. So we are dependent on these natural EMFs to thrive. And the opposite is true for human-made EMFs. These are the junk food of EMFs, of electromagnetic frequencies or electromagnetic fields. This is what it stands for. We have introduced in the last 100 years many types of different technologies, but even more recently, it was the wireless revolution with Wi-Fi in the beginning of the 2000s. And of course, the introduction of the cell phone. It was not that popular in the 90s. In the 2000s, it was becoming popular. And all of a sudden, with the advent of the iPhone and smartphones, every citizen, everyone from children to the elderly, now has a cell phone on their person almost all day, every day, and including when it comes to 80% of them near their pillow. So it's exposing us to a lot of new signals that were never seen before in nature. In fact, the background exposure to this type of radiation called radio frequency radiation, that is your cell phone, the smart meters you talked about, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, anything, this exposure has increased by a quintillion times in the last 100 years. That's a billion times a billion. So that's a 1 and 18 zeros of exposure, right? Of more exposure. So it is impossible to talk about going back to ancestral levels of exposure. I know a lot of people, especially let's say a decade ago, were advocating for a paleo diet, right? Oh, we should go back to ancestral living. ancestral sun exposure, ancestral everything. Well, now it's becoming increasingly difficult to go back to ancestral levels of this radiation because it is everywhere. And it might seem discouraging at first, of course, this discourse where you say, okay, well, it is everywhere, so therefore there's nothing I can do. But in fact, some of our biggest exposures come from devices that we decide to use, right? So we have full control over these exposures, and that's the good news, right? If we choose to use a phone, there are safer ways to use them, safer ways, and they are safer because they are less EMF intensive compared to other usage. And this is the same is true, for the meter you mentioned. A good way to mitigate a smart meter is to not have one in the first place. So opt out of the smart meter program, although this cannot be done in every state and every city and every country. So in certain situations, you're stuck with it, and you can use something that you put over it to dampen the signal and try to minimize how much it emits. But this entire discussion is all around uh, where are you exposed the most, from which devices, at which intensities, and for what length of time. And then what can you do to try to minimize your exposure best as you can. And it's not that complicated or costly to do, but it requires awareness and also changing habits, just like you would do for a change of diet, for example.
Right. Wow. That's just absolutely incredible and actually kind of scary. I didn't, I mean, I knew that we have a vast amount of EMF compared to, ancestral times. But that's actually pretty scary, when you hear those types of numbers. Um, can you tell us what are, you already touched on some of these, but are there any of the worst sources of EMFs at home or at work that you haven't yet touched on?
Well, I would say it's really the devices that are touching your body that can be considered the ultimate worst source of EMFs, just because of the increased cancer risks. And of course, cancer is just one of the things that could be triggered or worsened by cell phone exposure, but it's one of the most dangerous ones, right? Especially glioblastomas, this brain tumor that is one of the deadliest kind. I think the deadliest type of tumor you can ever develop. But there are also other cancers of the head that have been linked with talking on a cell phone on the ear, and they see this increase in ipsilateral cancer risk. So it means you talk on the right, you get a tumor on the right, which makes it even more plausible that this is a causality, that you talked on the phone and you got cancer from your phone, or saw an increase in your risk. There's also parotid gland cancer, thyroid cancer, and breast cancer that is increasingly linked with these exposures. So that's why I mentioned them. But the reality is that a lot of people these days don't even keep their phones near their face, but they keep it in the pocket. So these exposures are linked with a reduction of fertility in men, and then in women there are equal risks in my mind, because for men it can be measured, and there are more scientific studies around the fact that men who keep a phone in their pocket are that much more likely to see a reduction in their sperm count or sperm quality. But for women, they get one set of eggs for life, and even carry their future daughter's eggs inside. So it becomes very tricky, because you can impact the next generation as well. So we don't have much data around the cancer of that area, that growing area, but many researchers think that in the future we're gonna eventually link these exposures, keeping a cell phone in the pocket, and your risks of developing any cancer of the gonorrhea, including colon cancer, ovarian cancer, urinal tract cancer, testicular cancer, and most of these are increasing in our youth. And many researchers are, always baffled, like we don't know the answers, we don't know the factors. Well, one of the factors that, in my mind, is very plausible is that keeping a cell phone in the pocket is simply a bad idea. We've moved the carcinogen from the head to other organs. So this is really, I think, the top source we need to address is these anything that touches the body and emits wireless. And I'd say the second order of priority would be to tackle anything that is a device that emits radiation fairly close to the body. I would include laptops in that category, because if I have the laptop in front of me as I do this interview, it's emitting a lot of intensity, connecting, especially if I do Zoom or a social media or stream a movie. These are all EMF intensive activities, and it will be emitting a lot of radiation. Of course, I'm the EMF guy, so mine is wired. So don't worry about it. I'm protecting myself, but that's one way you can minimize exposure, is especially if you have a laptop that or a computer that stays in one place, you just wire it up. You have a cable instead of being on wireless. We can
Yeah.
dive deeper into that if people want, but I'll just mention that the Wi-Fi is both your computer and also the router itself, the machine that distributes the Wi-Fi. If the router is very close to your body for extended periods of time, that's another issue, because these are quite strong these days, and they're getting stronger. In fact, a lot of people who struggle with their Wi-Fi router get very frustrated, right? So what do? They call the company and they say, I want a stronger Wi-Fi, right? I want either a stronger, or I want a booster, and I want not 3 antennas, I want 5 antennas on there. So what you're doing is, yes, you're increasing coverage, but you're also increasing the risks that also come with the technology.
Yeah. What correlations have you seen, like study-wise, things that are published research studies, the correlation between the rise in the use of EMFs and the rise in these different like glioblastomas and cancers and all of that kind of stuff.
Well, the rising glioblastoma is, I'd say, the most credible type of cancer that has been increasing in certain countries. I think recently it was in the UK. They saw a doubling in glioblastomas in the last 2 decades, if I recall correctly. But these types of cancer are relatively rare, so it makes it almost easy to dismiss, because you say, well, a lot of people are using their phones, and where are the people dropping dead? Well, there are just a few people, but if it's a small fraction of all cell phone users that develop glioblastomas, we're talking about a lot of unnecessary harm. That being said, and right now we have over 100 different lawsuits in the U.S. around claims of brain tumors that have been triggered by cell phones, and in the future it will become an even greater number. So increasingly, so these people are winning. So I think that they're able to prove causality in court. So I think that in the near future, it will be recognized that there's no denying that these things can increase cancer risks. But it's not only cancer risks. There's a vast amount of different lines of evidence that have emerged. One of them is, to me, even more concerning. Cancer for sure is scary and dangerous, and some people die from it, of course, or have lifelong complications. But for example, one of the lines of research I've talked about recently is, if you're exposed as a pregnant mom, the more you're exposed by a cell phone radiation. I think they measured the abdomen with some kind of device in the studies. The more likely you are to have children with ADD, ADHD, or food allergies, and there were, I think, 5 or 6 large cohort studies on that. So much so that Dr. Hugh Taylor, who is a very esteemed scientist from Yale, said in his mind that plus the animal studies, there is causality. There is undeniable causality between the more you're exposed as a pregnant mom, the more likely your children will have. I don't know if we can say an impaired immune system, an impaired brain development. Is it nervous system? Many different things need to be answered in the future. But the reality is that something is happening to your children when they are exposed to this radiation before they're even born. So the greatest risks, in my mind, it's almost on the next generations in a sense. So, and if you have no intention of getting pregnant or being pregnant or having new children, it's also hormonal balance in your case, and longevity, right? Which is a different health strategy, different health considerations, but it's still very, very valid, and there's good reasons to think that cell phones and overall exposures we have to radio frequency is really messing up our hormones.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we are at our essence, we are a vibrational frequency that appears to be solid. And so, to me, it makes complete sense that when we have all of these, when we're being assaulted by all of these different frequencies that are not of the planet, that are not natural frequencies, that's definitely going to cause an issue with our mitochondria, with our, with the electrical impulses of our neurons and our axons, just all of the different problems. Like I can see all of that happening. And we have found, and I show this in our master classes, and I know you've got a big event coming up soon, right? I want to talk about that.
Sure.
But in our master classes, we show on graphs, we show the correlation, the direct correlation of the rise in use of pesticides since the 1970s, with and you can see the direct correlation of the rise in Parkinson's, the rise in Alzheimer's, the rise in and deaths due to. So not just diagnoses of, but deaths due to Alzheimer's, deaths due to Parkinson's, deaths due to uh, oh my gosh, I'm trying to remember what else. Oh, ADHD, not deaths, but ADHD, the rise in ADHD and the rise in autism. So, like, you can see all of that. It would be really interesting if we could put, like, if you were able to compile the information that you're finding and then create the graphs and you overlay them to show, as we've seen the rise in, what I'm saying, like, in EMF use, and then you can show the rise in these different things. Um, it's actually pretty alarming that we've got all of this. And what what information, or do you share published information, published research on these dangers? Do you share it in your master classes, in your big events that you have? Because I feel like people could use that information, if they could have it assembled for them, they could use this information and then take it to their local cities, so that, like, for example, if their local city doesn't have an option for people to be able to, pay a little extra and have those meter readers turned off, that they can present them with enough evidence that, will surely get them to, change their policies.
For sure. In the summit, we share about certain nonprofits that are working on this, that are fighting at different levels, municipal level, state level. Some of them, it's literally they're trying to lobby as hard as the telecom companies, but at the federal level, which is very difficult because, of course, the grassroots movement barely has any funding compared to how much the wireless companies are able to lobby the FCC in the US. So it's a very uphill battle, but it's getting somewhere. In the future, I think we'll see much safer regulations, and there's so many things that could be done at the city level or by health officials or by school boards to improve things. But it's gonna take some it's going to take courage from certain people that say, even though the federal level of regulation has not passed yet, we're going to do something different in our school to prevent things from happening. And we have in certain countries, they have much stricter regulations, for example, about Wi-Fi in school. They have much stricter regulations about the placement of cell phone towers. How close can they be to someone's bedroom, for example? Or what is the maximum permissible level of EMF that is acceptable for this population level? So just in an unavoidable public setting. And these
Yeah.
will vary greatly if you ask certain city or public officials from different countries. But in North America, I think most people are still under the impression that the government is supposed to take care of radio frequency, and they kind of don't want to think about it too much. And I sometimes I compare these EMFs to smoking, but I think in a sense that's the wrong analogy because people can stop smoking and the benefits of smoking are not so great. I guess you get like nicotine hit and you can concentrate better, but eventually you become addicted and it's bad for you and you can stop. But what about cell phone radiation, right? It's like, okay, I can minimize, but I still want my phone. So it is more tricky to sell to the population also, because the truth is, it shouldn't be up to citizens to protect themselves from EMFs. It should be up to cell phone manufacturers and engineers to
Well,
figure
that's
out
not going to
safer
happen.
ways to create devices, right?
Yeah, but that's not going to happen because they're all about the profit. And, I would compare them to DuPont and the other chemical
Yeah.
manufacturers around the country. Less than 10% of all chemicals that are being used um, and purchased by the public, in personal care products, for lawn products, just everything. Less than 10% of all chemicals that are being sold in the United States have any type of regulatory testing. And out of that less than 10%, the ones that do have testing, the government does not require that it's third party unfunded testing by the company that's
Yeah.
needing the testing. So DuPont will go to Stanford, or not Stanford, they'll go to, like, I don't know, a university here in the United States, right? UC San Diego, wherever, and they'll say, hey, we want you to publish a study, or we want you to do a study to prove that our Teflon is safe. And they know well and good that if they don't come out with the results that DuPont wants, DuPont will cancel the research. So it cancels their funding. And then these researchers at the university,
Yeah.
they can't pay their mortgage. And so this has actually been going on since the 1940s. And if we don't have regulation on all of the toxic chemicals and all of the toxic metals that are being put out into our environment, being put into even our foods, it's absolutely ridiculous, right? That are killing us, causing cancers, causing depression, causing the biggest rise in neurodegenerative diseases that we've ever seen. Do we really think that these companies that are creating these devices that have EMF are going to be around to protect us? I think the answer is
No.
no. And I
Yeah.
also feel like, the way our government is now, um, they don't care about that. They've got other agendas. I feel like we need to bring somebody into government who actually has a proven record of having been trying to protect us. And, Bobby Kennedy is one of those people. He's running third party. He's an attorney. He has been fighting and taking these big companies like DuPont. He's been taking them to court since the 1970s. And most people here, put a one in the chat if you know that Bobby Kennedy has been doing that for since the 1970s, actually working to protect us when most of us don't even know that that's happening. I know, Diane, I know that you would know that, but many people don't know that. And I think that it's important for us to know because we do have elections coming up. And I don't want to get into the politics of all of this, but we do have elections coming up soon. And I think it's really important that for us to understand who really does care and who's not just saying it, because politicians just say whatever they want to say to get you in
Yeah.
their back pocket. But he's actually been doing the work. And he's out there speaking on it now, trying to gain more awareness with people who don't already know. But outside of our politicians, we need to vote for the right ones, but we also need to vote with our dollars. And so, what other things can we do to vote with our dollars to show people, to show the governments, and to show these companies that we're not going to allow for continued increase in these radiation levels? Like, my husband was just looking at a net made out of silver thread to put around our bed.
Yeah.
We are building a house right now, and we are doing all hardwire. So we're going to hardwire all of the electronics in the house.
Nice.
And so, like, and we're looking at getting a EMF measuring device so that we can see if we need to paint certain walls with that special copper-based paint or whatever that keeps the EMFs out. But outside of making all these modifications to your home, putting a timer on your Wi-Fi, if that's what you have, what other things can we do? And then after we talk about that, let's jump into a little bit about some of the other symptoms, conditions, and diseases that we're seeing, because I feel like that's going to really hit home for people because it's so broad in the different types of symptoms and conditions that it's causing.
Sure. Well, there's a lot there. I'll start with, I guess, the activism part. How can you get involved with this? It really starts, of course, protecting yourself, but if you think about the average person here in Montreal, they don't know. So for sure, we have to get involved with the cause, and even if it's just talking about it with your friends and family, but there are certain organizations that I mentioned during the summit that are great to support. Bobby Kennedy is one of the speakers on that 2024 EMF Hazard Summit. So I was very happy to talk with him, and we did talk about regulations and how we can turn things around. And for him, it comes down to cleaning house in the regulatory agencies, which can be done, but probably with a lot of difficulty because some people are, almost parasites in the system. People that don't care, people that prefer to keep a comfortable job rather than doing the right thing. I think it's the amount of lobbying and I mean I could call it corruption at the regulatory agencies, and I'm talking about the US, but I'm from Canada. Health Canada is not better. It's not better. It's just parroting. It's repeating what the Americans are doing and not even bothering. To this day, Health Canada is saying that if all the children and adults would be exposed to EMFs 24/7 from a tower or from cell phones, everything is fine. There's zero health effects. So they're completely irresponsible in how they have reviewed the science. And one of the organizations I mentioned is Children's Health Defense. For those who don't know, Children's Health Defense is one of the organizations that Bobby Kennedy was spearheading. Now he's, let's say, semi-retired since he's also running for president. But Children's Health Defense, along with the Environmental Health Trust, and several other organizations sued the FCC back in 2021, and they won. Uh, Nothing happened yet because these things take time, and the FCC is stalling. But what they won over is that the FCC has been told by the judges that they need to go back to the drawing board, and they have not properly reviewed the science around EMS and health impacts. So we're still waiting for the FCC to do something, and in fact, the FCC will have to probably be sued a second time for not fulfilling what the court said. But basically, they're just operating at the moment in flagrant disregard of the law, and they don't have the expertise to do so. So I don't know how this thing will evolve, but the reason that we had this win and that things are moving forward on the legal side is that many people got involved and donated a bit of money to these nonprofits. So I'm very thankful for them, and to this day, I'm still very involved with different organizations, trying to help them financially or the best I can, talking about their work also.
I think that's beautiful. That's so good that you're doing that. And I would love to talk with you, off camera about some of this other work that you're doing because, we would like to get more involved in being able to help support the awareness and actually being able to get these regulations changed and holding them accountable, holding accountable the powers that be, because that's the only way that we're going to make this change.
For sure.
Let's dive into symptoms, conditions, and diseases for just a few minutes because most of the people who we see and educate and guide on how to heal themselves are chronically sick. And when they come to us, the majority of them have 15 or more symptoms, conditions, and diseases that are
Yeah.
rated at a 7 to a 10, with 10 being the worst. And so, one of the things that we teach is that it's never just one thing. Like 99% of the time, it's not one thing that takes a person down, right? It's the cumulative effect of all of the toxicities in our environment combined with unprocessed trauma, unprocessed emotions, like, and and those more esoteric type issues. But it's the compounding effect of the chemicals in our body, of the mold, of our gut ecosystem being completely disrupted with bacteria and parasites and things overgrowing and candida overgrowing that don't normally overgrow. And then on top of that, we're adding EMF to the mix. And so I think it's really important and super relevant for us to spend just a few minutes talking about all of the different broad range of symptoms, conditions, and diseases that are associated with EMF impact.
For sure. So a lot of the symptoms that are related to, let's say, EMF some call it electrosensitivity. We'll call it that to keep things simple. It really resembles a lot of other conditions, so it makes it a little bit confusing for people. But the reality is, of course, multiple things could be causing these symptoms, and oftentimes they are kind of compounding or multiplying each other. Including fatigue, including insomnia, depression, anxiety, brain fog, memory lapses. Some of them are more telling that people are, in fact, some of my colleagues that are environmental medicine doctors who regularly treat these electro hypersensitive patients tell me it's really two things. Tinnitus is very telling that someone is especially sensitive to EMS, and then heart palpitations. So tinnitus might be, electrical disruption of the inner ear, or the ear signals getting to the brain. I don't know the exact mechanisms myself. And then heart palpitations might be a disruption of the electrical controls of the heart. So again, some people are exquisitely sensitive compared to their spouse or their husband, which makes it very, very difficult for their significant others or their boss or their friends or their family to recognize that this could be real. In fact, some people are so sensitive that they literally cannot live in a city. And that's in the most extreme examples. Some people have flown from civilization, or not flown. Flown is flying, right? It's they they ran away from civilization.
Yeah.
So the reality is that there's literally some people are in exile because they cannot feel good in a city and they cannot recuperate. But for some people, they're still in this level where it's possible to still heal in a city, but a reduction of EMF will greatly improve their symptoms overall. And this is really where it gets a bit difficult to pinpoint, okay, well, is EMF a priority for me or not? And in reality, you might start just with the action steps that are very easy to do and see how you feel, right? There's no harm to turning off your phone before bed. And the only harm you might do is maybe you're going to improve your health. No harm is done there. So it's not like you're investing a lot of time and money. When you get into more advanced mitigation strategies, including shielding the bedroom, this normally doctors are recommending that to patients where they have really pinpointed, okay, EMF is a big issue for you, and avoiding EMF needs to be part of your strategy. Just like a doctor specialized in mold might see someone that is mold sensitive and they realize the environment is moldy, part of your strategy will be to get outside this environment. You're going to rent out your place and cleaning up. And in the meantime, you're going to live somewhere else because your body will keep getting triggered by this mold every single breath, and it doesn't work for you. So it's really up to doctors and also the patient own analysis to make this determination. But sometimes what is useful for people for anything related to the environment and to pinpoint how sensitive they might be is to take a vacation, just an EMF vacation, go camping for 7 days. And especially, I'd say a minimum of 5 days is usually recommended by doctors I talk to. And don't bring your devices or don't use them, to just make sure that you're not EMF exposed too much, and try to go off the grid if you can, even better. And of course, if you want to be reachable, bring a satellite phone. I've done that once. My wife was about to give birth to our son, and my older brother told me, okay, we're gonna go to this place, we're gonna go to a shack, no electricity. And I said, okay, well, that's fine. I didn't really think about the fact that my wife might get a call and have to give premature birth, and I was off the grid. So then she discovered it, and we discovered that there's no cell phone signal at all, no cell phone coverage in that region of the world. And I said, uh-oh. So I found some guy on Craigslist that was renting his satellite phone, and these still exist, people. So just in case you want to go off the grid, you can get a satellite phone. That's something I learned from that from that experience. But I did feel amazing off the grid. It's just not only is it nature and the purity of the air and the lack of stress, but I think that electropollution, when you get outside, it just clears your head like nothing else, personally.
Yeah, absolutely. I've actually recommended that for some of our clients as well. Get out as far away from, quote unquote civilization as possible,
Yeah.
and, go out and do some earth grounding, just have some time in the quietness of and the vast expanse of the beauty of, nature. And see how you feel whenever you come back. Everyone always comes back feeling really, really good. And so I do feel that, you know, the EMFs are having a greater effect on people overall than what people really, really realize. And when you
Yeah.
compound that on top of the mold, on top of the chemicals, on top of all of the other environmental and emotional stressors that they already have, I feel like, it's scary to think about our future generations and what it is that they're going to have to deal with. If we as the parents, as the older generations, can't get a hold of this to make the world a better place for them. And that's one of the reasons that we educate the way that we do. It's so we certainly want to help everyone who's sick and everyone who's looking for healing and everyone who wants to get their life back. There's a deeper desire for me as well. And that is to also be able to pass this knowledge down to our children and our grandchildren so that they don't have to grow up and end up with these types of diseases. And then they're, on their last straw, on their last dollar, looking for anybody who can possibly help them. Like, it breaks my heart to see that. And we see a lot of people who have, they're at the end of their rope. Literally, they've been sick for 20 years. And, helping them is our greatest joy. It's our passion and it's our purpose. And thank you for supporting us, Nick, in that. Thank you for supporting us in that. Um, and um, and I want to make sure that our future generations have a chance as well. I've got grandchildren, you've got children. Tara, who's one of my assistants who's on with us tonight, she's got children too. And, as parents, we're always talking about this, and it's something that we definitely need to address. And so with some of the things that we can do to address reducing EMF exposure, we talked about a few things. Are there any other are there any other things that we can do to reduce our EMF exposure that we have not already talked about yet?
Right. Yeah. There's a lot of things you can do. I'll just summarize because it starts with the bedroom. In my mind, and this is what I've shared in my courses, it's really what is, let's say, within the arm's length of your pillow that could impact you the most, as far as your sleep quality goes, and then your ability to recuperate from anything. That's really, there's been some studies around how cell phones might change your brain waves and prevent you from getting the best sleep possible. This is from 20 years ago. And to this day, I don't see any warning on cell phones saying this device might interfere with your sleep. And the reality is that in some of these studies on healthy participants, they had 30 minutes of cell phone exposure near the head. And some of them saw a sleep onset delay of an additional 1 hour. So for
Oh,
1 hour,
wow.
they were insomniac. So, and the researchers said this effect might be much, much more exacerbated by individual sensitivity. So it would be interesting to see how much, some people might be more sensitive to this disruption in brain waves. So make sure to turn off your phone or put it in the next room or put it on airplane mode, depending on what is most convenient for you. And I know a lot of parents prefer keeping it in the next room with the ringer on because they don't have a landline anymore and they don't want to be completely unreachable at night, and that's okay. I respect that, but make sure that your bedroom must be a safe haven. Technology should not be in there, should not be emitting these EMFs as you sleep, because you're just interfering with your body's ability to recuperate. Then The second thing I'll mention is any device that's touching your body. Again, something very unpopular that I keep saying is that I'm not a fan of Bluetooth anything on the body, including the Bluetooth earbuds that maybe, some people have just purchased last week and they say, oh no, this Nick guy, I don't like his content because, of course, I'm telling you that, yes, these are sexy, convenient, modern, uh, this is how they're sold, and they're super convenient, and yeah, maybe the sound is excellent and the fit is perfect, but you're replacing cell phone radiation with a similar type of radio frequency radiation in the ear. Even guys like Dr. Andrew Huberman from Stanford last year in early 2023 said he doesn't feel comfortable keeping these in his ear because of the potential effect on the ear bone and delicate structures of the ear and the brain. And I can only concur. I can say, I mean, there's barely any studies on Bluetooth to this date because this is such new technology, but everything we had prior to the introduction of Bluetooth was showing harm, or at least the summary of this entire research was, the biggest studies we have on cancer risks around this technology, on what technology the rats were exposed. They were exposed to 2G and 3G. These technologies are already obsolete, and this is the best data we have. So we're extremely late. We're not even, it's like we're going to start studying 4G and 6G will be rolled out, right? We
Yeah.
study 6G,
Well,
10G.
that should be illegal,
Yeah, for sure. Exactly.
shouldn't
Because
it? I mean, what do our viewers think? Like, don't you think that that should be illegal? I mean, all of these things should have testing, third-party testing that's not funded by the companies, to be able to show if this stuff is even safe.
it should be pre-market, but the determination of health right now is based on the assumption that everything else prior to 5G, for example, to mention this recent rollout, they said everything prior was safe, therefore 5G is safe. That's pretty much their conclusion. The reality is everything before was unsafe, therefore 5G is unsafe. And that's really what, and when scientists say, let's look at the medical literature to find 5G and health effects. There's something like a handful of studies. And yet the population has been exposed to 5G in certain cities since, I'd say, 2020, 2019. In certain downtown areas of certain cities, they were already testing some 5G antennas. So, I mean, it's always backwards. It's always backwards. We're always studying the past, and we're rolling these technologies first and asking questions second. So it is a reckless type of rollout. But going back to the exposures, if you mitigate your pillow area or your bedroom, you mitigate these devices you have on your person, and let's say you also tackle the Wi-Fi router, you're already in a good spot because most people don't do it, right? And these are leading to your highest exposure possible. And if you carry your phone, and let's say you have to keep your phone on, maybe you're a business person and you have to be on call, consider getting a case or something that can help you carry it more safely. I like Shield Your Body, but there are a lot of good companies, Defender Shield. There are certain cases you can purchase that will mitigate part of the problem. And at least don't keep it in your pocket as you walk around all day because it's just not worth it.
Yeah, yeah. And what about anyone who's interested in doing some EMF mitigation in their home? Can they buy a device or should they hire someone or like like what's the best way to even go about that? Because I know that we're going to have some questions on that.
For sure. You can purchase your own device if, let's say, if you have the personal motivation to learn about these things, because the learning curve can be high. One of the meters I recommend on my website is called the SEM ProTech 33. It's made in France. So CEM ProTech 33, which stands for champ électromagnétique. It's the French version of EMF, right? CEM. So CEM ProTech is a good one because it shows three types of EMFs with an LED system. It's very easy to follow. What I found is that in the past, when I wrote my book years ago, I did recommend other meters, but a lot of my readers told me I never use it. It's on a shelf gathering dust because it's too complicated, or I'm very confused. So some of them told me, the readings are giving me anxiety because this is high, that is high. So it gives them the impression that everything is dangerous. So if you think it's going to make you more anxious, don't purchase one of these EMF readers. Instead, hire a professional. It is more of an investment, but there are many very, very good and competent building biology consultants in the United States and beyond. There's a lot of other practitioners around the world, including in Canada. And these professionals will have the EMF readers, and they do have the knowledge to tell you, okay, what is the worst source am I exposed to in my bedroom? And then they could say, well, look, your alarm clock is emitting Bluetooth. You should change it for, a dumber alternative, an alarm clock that does not have this radiation. And you might be surprised because a lot of people realize there are hidden sources of EMFs that they did not really expect to be emitting in their home. So that's one way to go about it, because once you hire these professionals, a lot of them will tell you what is your top priority to try to clean things up.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that getting someone to come in and do the mitigation for you could be really great. Because to your point, if you're, even if you know how to use the device, then for some people that can be overwhelming trying to figure out, well, what exactly do I use now to help reduce the radiation that's coming in from this wall or coming in from that wall?
Yeah.
No, there's Dr. Ritter. I can't remember his first name, but Dr. Ritter is down in Austin, Texas. Do you know him?
I have heard the name, but no, I don't know him.
Yeah. So what's great about Dr. Ritter, he's a neuroscience professor, Department of Neurology and Electromagnetic Radiation, at I don't remember which school or whatever, but I think that it's amazing that he's a neuroscience professor, right? And he is also one of his main things that he does is EMF mitigation for people down in Texas. And now I'm sure you could, anyone could get him to like fly out or whatever, but he's always posting really um, relevant information and other, information and recordings and stuff on his Facebook page. You can find him at like Dr. Ritter EMF. But he's always putting stuff from like Science Direct. He'll post up YouTube videos of people talking about how they're getting tumors from the side of the phone that they were listening to, like just all kinds of really interesting information. And so I think that getting someone to come in and help with EMF mitigation could, certainly be a really, really good idea for a lot of people. Is that something that you also talk about in your upcoming event?
Yes, for sure. We have three different EMF mitigation specialists that talk about shielding, that talk about other aspects of environmental health, such as air quality or water quality. Also, we have Ryan Blazer, who is a great expert on many aspects of a healthy home, and also Rob Metzinger from Safe Living Technologies, and he talks about the worst sources that he finds in people's homes. So we do address that, and also recommend different types of websites where you can find professionals in your area.
That's really good. I'm gonna want to watch this because I need to really up level my knowledge on EMF. And so I'm definitely going to watch it. I want all of our clients to watch it, and I want all of our followers to watch it too. Can you talk to us a little bit about this event, when it is, and are people able to start registering for the event now?
Yes,
Or yeah?
they can start right away. I think you're gonna have links on your newsletter or exactly in
Yeah.
the comments. So it's called the 2024 EMF Hazard Summit. It's 20 interviews with attorneys, medical doctors specialized in electrosensitivity, EMF scientists, EMF mitigation specialists, and activists. And the goal here is to help you understand how much EMF could be an issue for you. So some people find out it's not that much of an issue. They don't have a lot of sensitivity. Some other people are surprised and they realize, my God, once I start reducing my EMF exposure, I feel much, much better, which means that you were fairly sensitive. And some other people realize that over time they get more and more sensitive, and there are ways to recover from electrosensitivity, which is part of what is discussed inside the summit. So it's April 11th to 14th, and it's 5 new talks free of charge every day, starting at 9 a.m. And the French company is CEM Protect 33. That's not the name of the company, but the model of the EMF meter that you can find on my website, theemfguy.com.
Okay.
But yeah, that's the summit. The gist of the summit is really an educational event that we have been putting together for 3 years now, and this third edition is really focused on electrosensitivity because I uh, too many people write to me with these messages of I would say almost despair. I don't want to be very doom and gloom about it, but that's the reality. Some of them have lost hope and they feel extremely electrosensitive. And I've been trying to find solutions, but since it's a very emerging field of science that is not well defined, what is electrosensitivity, who is more prone to electrosensitivity. So part of what I had to do was to interview some of the doctors that have this medical knowledge in the field, where some of the knowledge is not yet published. And Dr. Neil Nathan, for example, in the summit is especially good, especially for you, Dr. V, if you want to learn about some of the treatments. Dr. Neil Nathan is just brilliant. And he also has practitioner level training that he's doing with, I think, Dr. Jill Krista, if I recall correctly. So they're
Okay.
talking, and for them, it's not even just a question of electrosensitivity. It is a question of what they call the sensitive patient. And
Yeah.
Dr. Neil Nathan will have his book coming up, I think, in 2 months' time. It's in pre-order on Amazon. The Sensitive Patient is the title, if I recall correctly. And he says that, sensitivities don't come by themselves. Just like you said, people have multiple issues. And many people, though, tend to overlook EMF as one of the sensitivities that they have to address. So if you address mold, but you are equally electrosensitive and mold sensitive, sometimes you cannot get over that mold reaction because maybe the EMFs are keeping you triggered and inflamed. So the goal is to make sure that you don't miss anything. If you're trying to, you kind of have to do everything right. That's the kind of the unfortunate situation, I think, for people that are chronically ill. And the more ill you are, the more you have to get things right. So overlooking EMFs is a very costly mistake for some of these people that are sick.
Yeah, and especially it'll be really interesting to see what Dr. Neal has to say in his book. What we have found is that the highly sensitive patient, the one that's like chemically sensitive, they're sensitive to even their supplements. Like we've even had clients who are highly sensitive to things that they literally need in their body, like protein, amino acids,
Wow.
vitamin D, vitamin C. Like we've actually seen this happen, and we're just like, it's mind blowing to me. But the common denominator that I see, that I'll be curious to see if Dr. Neal talks about this, is that these people have the biggest toxic burden. Those are the ones like they can barely handle being alive in their body. They
Yeah.
are so sensitive to everything because they have the biggest toxic loads. And that's what's causing the sensitivity. And I'm wondering if Dr. Neal is going to see that same correlation.
He talked about toxic load. He also talked about infections,
Hmm.
certain types of well, he mentioned Lyme and Bartonella co-infection
Yeah.
also, but it will vary from patient to patient. For some people, it's even in the case of electrosensitivity. Dr. Magda Havas, a researcher at Trent University in Canada, also shared that she identified certain risk factors that, let's say, can trigger electrosensitivity. One of them is whiplash, for example, or physical trauma. Some people get in a car accident, and the moment that they recuperate, they get out of the hospital, they start feeling their phone. What is the link there? Well, it looks like a physical trauma sometimes can have an impact on the nervous system, and it completely dysregulates our response to radio frequency radiation. So it becomes very complicated for the person. They're trying to recuperate from what was a physical trauma. Next thing they know, they become sensitive to the phone. And then for some of them, it gets worse because they're not able to pinpoint exactly what they should do. So then the Wi-Fi becomes a problem. Then they get headaches. Then they get this and that. So
Yeah.
over time, the level of electrosensitivity becomes completely impossible to deal with. And this is really where it gets out of control and they feel completely sick in this environment.
That's so interesting. With my chiropractic background, as I'm hearing you say this, because I used to do biomechanical work for years, I did sports medicine. And, we really understand with great depth how we are electrical beings. You and I talked about that earlier,
Hmm.
but we have an electrical system that is the nervous system, that is the brain, that then has a spinal cord that runs through it. And then branching off the spinal cord, going into every cell, tissue, and organ in the body are nerves, right, that are going in and innervating these. And if you have an accident that's like a whiplash, then what happens is that the structure of the spine gets altered, either because the muscles get super tight in an effort to try to protect the spine, which the over tightening of the muscles can can actually change the curve of the spine and create a pinching on the dorsal nerve roots.
Hmm.
Or you could actually bulge a disc or break a vertebrae, which then will do that also. And when you're doing that, you're essentially impeding the electrical impulse
Yeah.
that's going through the body. So what are you doing if you then zoom out of that and you're looking at that on from like a 20,000 foot view, if we're pulling out of the weeds and we're chunking up, then what's essentially happened is that physical trauma caused a change to your bioelectrical frequency, to your bioenergetic frequency, and now it's become more sensitive and less adaptable to the EMF
Yes.
frequencies because we're all being affected by it, but some of us have less resilience than others. And so when we have things like certain types of infections, or we have a physical trauma that alters our, um, literally that alters the electrical flow going through the body, or we've got toxins or heavy metals that are electrical conducers, right? That they're conducers of electricity. That actually makes a lot of sense to me. How people could become much more sensitive to the EMF once they have some sort of a physical trauma like that. That's fascinating, and I look forward to seeing research come out on that in the future.
Me too, and I think it's really a good way to put it. It's really the resilience of the system can be affected by different things, and when you are resilient, maybe you're able to tune out these exposures, right? You don't want to mistake a packet of information that contains a cat picture with you don't want this to affect your cells, how your cells communicate. This is not how it's supposed to be. You're supposed to, I guess, ignore it, or still have it, but not be so overwhelmed by the level of noise in the environment that the normal bodily processes are not taking place. And this is where some people seems to be very affected at many levels, and the little change in the electrical environment surrounding them is enough to put them in the symptomatic zone.
Yeah, yeah. Well, this is just fascinating information. I'm really excited to support the work that you're doing because it is so important. People really need to understand that this is a toxin, just like all of the other toxins that I've talked about and the ones that I teach about. And when we do talk about EMF, we don't talk about it as much as some of the other things. However, for everyone listening, the EMF, it's just as much of a toxin. And for some people, it's detrimental and can really shorten the lifespan significantly if it's not addressed. As I saw with my engineers as that I had as patients, back before we moved to an educational model, and I was seeing patients in my brick and mortar office down in Austin, they were really, really lucky because they were getting super sick and they figured it out and they were able to do something about it. Um, well, I want to thank you for coming. I think we could go on and on with this conversation because you've got so much information to share. I'm just really excited that you've got your big event coming. Did everyone see the link that I put in the chat box so that you can click on it and register for Nick's Summit? Put a one in the box if you saw the link. Put a two in the box if you need the link again. I'm happy to pop it in again if you need it, if you're not seeing it in there. Perfect. Well, thank you again. And let's get on with another conversation. Let's do this again soon. There we go. Everybody's putting it in there. Joanne, here, let me give you the link really quick, hon. Um, nope, that's the shielding shop. Hold on one second. I want to give it to you now. We are going to send out everyone always asks, but I want to make sure that you guys know that within 48 hours, we send out the recording. And so share this with your friends, share this with your loved ones. And we'll have the link in there as well. I would go ahead and register as soon as you can. I'm sure spots are limited for this summit. And so you want to definitely grab your seat and get in. And thank you again. And wow, I honestly can't wait to get back on another call with you so that we can talk about anything new that you've learned. And I would also love to hear Bobby Kennedy's interview. That's amazing that you got him on your summit to do an interview with you. I'm excited to hear what he has to say.
Yeah, I think I got lucky, but at the same time, the topic of EMF is near and dear to his heart. He's been advocating for EMF safer regulations and, talking about the corruption at the FCC for years now through Children's Health Defense. And not a lot of people they know him for, environmental causes and vaccination, but also EMF was a big part of his work at the Children's Health Defense. So I was honored. I was very, very humbled. At the end of the interview, he told me, "Thank you so much for your work, Nick." I was like,
Oh,
okay, that's so
that's so,
bizarre. But yeah, I appreciate it. He understands that, we need so many people to try to solve these problems that really seem unsurmountable. So I appreciate everything he's done, and I hope I can follow in his footsteps in one way or another through to my education.
yeah, I think that would be wonderful for all of us to be able to follow in his footsteps. He definitely has some big, big shoes to fill.
For sure. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Nick. I'm sending you lots of hugs and lots of loving vibes through the internet, as are, I'm sure, all of our followers. We love your work and we love your mission and we love your purpose. And thank you, everyone, for joining us for this episode of our Inner Circle Live podcast. We love you. We care about you. And we're here to bring you all of the best, most relevant information that we can possibly find on how you can reclaim your health and sustain health and longevity and vitality in your life. Thank you. We'll talk to you soon.
See ya. Bye bye.
Bye.